Well, I understand that what we have to give you this morning is how we came to Barber. We enter into the land of miracle working, not mine, of course, Barber's. Barber always claimed, I do not perform miracles. And in Barber's language, he was correct. He doesn't perform miracles because to him, nothing is a miracle. Everything is a miracle. But from our point of view, which is space-time experience, we see things as miracles. I had been a very sick woman for 9 years. I was married to Hugh Kingsmill, the English author. I had 4 children, and I was looking after a 5th. The war was on. We were caught up in the terrible experience. We lived in London. I and the whole family, my children with me. We didn't evacuate them. We were caught up in the terrible experience of what were known as doodle bugs, these terrible machines that used to come over London and drop, and that was the end of whatever was underneath them. I was so sick, suffering from acute migraines, which meant I could never keep any food down, and had gone down to 5 stone. And my poor husband was quite desperate. Doctor after doctor, they couldn't find what it was. And suddenly someone said to my husband, why don't you try psychoanalysis? Well, I was so ignorant at the time that I didn't know whether it was something that came out of a bottle, a medicine, or a pill. But I was so desperate, I was prepared to try anything. And so we found an analyst, a Swede, and I started my analysis. Within 6 months, the migraines had stopped. I was so caught up in getting to know myself. Fascinating. I didn't have time to be sick or have headaches. I found myself endlessly interesting. And then started a series of absolutely remarkable experience. In my dreams, you know about psychoanalysis, of course, they examine your dreams. In my dreams, I met my Persian prince. I didn't know his name. I only knew what he looked like and all the teaching he gave me. And this lasted for a whole week, 5 days a week, 50 minutes with the analyst. Off I trotted with sheets and sheets. I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning writing down what my Persian prince had said to me. And it got to Friday morning, and as I entered the consulting room, I thought, the analyst said, Mrs. Kingsmill, I want to warn you that if you go on with this series of lies that you have been presenting to me for over a week, I will stop the analysis. Of course, it was a terrible shock. I started stammering and I said, but they're not lies. They're not lies. He said, you are fabricating this. You have created for yourself a yes man. He said, and your yes man just puts across all your... I said, look, just wait a minute. If I am capable of inventing out of here all that I have been bringing you, I shouldn't be in analysis. He said, stop it, I'm serious. I am so serious, he said, I am not going to continue this morning, and you are not to come back to continue your analysis until you apologize for the waste of my precious time as well as your own. You are paying for it. But for me, it is a waste of time to listen to all this nonsense. Well, I staggered out of the place, and on the way home, thump, 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 a migraine. I managed to get home, and as my husband was a writer, he was at home. And I said, I've got to go to bed, I've got a migraine. I had a little sleep, and after lunch, my husband came to me and he said, we lived in Holland Park. I'm going down to the library, Kensington Library, can I get you a book? I was an enormous reader. I said, yes, get me a book, but please, only something very light, a novel, but very light, nothing serious, nothing mystical, nothing religious, just very light. And just before tea, he came back from the library and put on my bed a book. I picked it up and looked at it and let out a moan. The Perfect Master by C.B. Purdom. However, as I didn't know who the Perfect Master was or C.B. Purdom, in my petulant rage, I said, "Nyeh!" And the book fell on the floor by my bed. And Hugh Kingsmill, I always refer to him as H.K., a very kindly and very indulgent to me man, picked it up, looking at me very reproachfully for my bad manners, put the book on my bed at the page it had opened to. And I happened to look down, and I gave a great gasp. I said, "It's my Persian prince. This is the person who's been visiting me all week. He's real. Look, HK, look at him, look." And my husband looked at me very indulgently. Well, needless to say, by the evening, I'd read the book. I'd forgotten I had a migraine. I'd read the book. It was Friday night. I wrote straight away to the name at the back of the book. Those interested, please write to Will Beckett. His address was at Ealing. I wrote to Will Beckett straight away. He got the letter on the Monday morning and telephoned. And he said, "Mrs. Kingsmill, this is William Beckett. You want to see me?" I said, "Yes, indeed, I do." He said, "Can I come today?" I said, "Yes, please come and have tea." And William Beckett came and just said to me, "Mrs. Kingsmill, don't worry, don't be afraid of this." He said, "Barbara calling." He said, "It's Barbara calling you. Barbara calling you." He said, "It's very difficult, of course, the war's on. You can write to Barbara, but he said, whether you will get an answer or what, but he said, write to India. Meanwhile, I will give you Miss de Leon's address." Now, Delia de Leon at that time was caretaker for the Florence Nightingale Hospital. And so, of course, I rang Delia up straight away, and I just said, "Miss de Leon, Will Beckett says I'm not to worry, that it's Barbara calling, and he's given me your address. Can I come to see you?" And I remember going along to the Florence Nightingale Hospital and meeting Delia, who took the whole story as a matter of course. No surprise, nothing. I thought, well, this is okay. And that was the start of my relationship with Delia, which has continued. A little rackety, me being me and Delia being Delia, but still a very strong friendship, relationship in service to Barbara. Well, of course, Barbara appeared to me in my dream that night, on the Monday evening, and said, apologize to your analyst, go back and apologize to your analyst. Don't apologize for the lies you have told, but apologize for the fact that you gave him material he couldn't understand. He said, you don't have to tell him that. He said, just apologize and finish your analysis. It is very essential for you. He said, analysis is never finished. You can go on analyzing yourself until you pass over and begin again when you come back. But, he said, it is very good. It is very good for you. So go on until you are told that you're good enough to become a member of sane society. And so I went back, and presumably I'd become a member of sane society. But I have to say that Barbara did not appear again to me for a very, very long while. I then had to work. I started reading, I reread Purdom. Delia gave me the 5 volumes of the discourses. And this is a sideline, but I'll tell you. In my enthusiasm, I wrote to India, and I said, I had been given the discourses by Delia. And I said, they're wonderful, but they need a bit of editing for the Western people. The Mandalay were up in arms. Who is this woman? Editing Barbara. Well, we got over that one because it was eventually seen. But Barbara, I think I better tell this about HK. My husband was so himself entranced by the discourses that he offered to edit them. I was very hurt. The Mandalay Barbara didn't write back and say, this is wonderful. Incidentally, HK was supposed to be a wonderful stylist. But instead, I was told that C.B. Purdom was going to be asked to edit the discourses, which he eventually did. Now, Hugh Kingsmill died, developed an ulcer of the stomach, and died in 1949, so that he only had, at that time, 2 or 3 years to live. So you see how Barbara knows everything. Hugh Kingsmill would not, with all the work that he already had on hand, would have taken 3 or 4 years to edit the discourses. So Barbara put it into the hands of C.B. Purdom. But for quite a time, I got very cold and very distant letters from the Mandalay, who thought it was a great impertinence. So that was that. Hugh Kingsmill died in 1949, and shortly we knew Tom. Tom was in the literary world. We knew Tom. And my husband said to Tom, Tom, will you look after Dorothy when I've gone? He knew he was dying. And Tom said, yes, of course you do. Well, Tom was married at the time. But let me say that Tom and I fell in love with each other. We tried to be honourable, and as after my analysis, my own analyst told me, incidentally, the brute kept my material, all the writing Barbara's teaching, and wouldn't give it me back. My analyst suggested that I became a lay analyst because by the end of my analysis, I was showing a great deal of perceptivity about analysis. And Tom and I became very friendly. We knew we were in love with one another, but Tom was married and he had 2 children. But eventually the situation became such, and by that I mean the relationship with his wife, and Tom and I settled down together. And when we got the letter from India that Barbara was to come in 1952, Tom and I settled down early in 1952. When we got the letter, I made no attempt to convert Tom to Barbara. I just carried on with writing to India, doing my reading. For me, the discourses have been a daily get up in the morning and read a bit of discourses. I've done this ever since I contacted them. I never asked Tom to read them. I used to talk a little bit about Barbara, but never asked that he should. But when this letter came, I said to Tom, tomorrow morning I'm going to meet Mayhew Barbara. He's at the Charing Cross Hotel. Tom said, I will come with you. It was quite early, and now, as this is Tom's meeting with Mayhew Barbara, over to Tom for a moment.
Well, my impression of Dorothy was, I thought she was quite wonderful, but just a bit nutty about religion, and she seemed to be interested in Eastern religions, and in particular in a character whose name meant nothing to me, Mayhew Barbara. I myself had officially renounced, when I say officially, I mean officially to myself, renounced religion and anything to do with it on my 21st birthday. I thought I came from a religious family, and I thought if it's a choice between this world and the next, I'm all for this world. I can see it's there, and I'm not sure about the other one. So when I went along with Dorothy, it was for Dorothy's sake and not for the opportunity to meet somebody of whom I knew nothing. It was a fine morning. We went across the park and we turned up at this Charing Cross hotel, which was a rather seedy hotel, a terminus hotel for railways. You know, they're never very good, are they? And they're the kind of place where a manager would meet his salesman to show his new lines in stockings or spaghetti. I was a little disturbed. We didn't get in to see this character we'd come to see. We had to be there at 8 o'clock, I think, and I was waiting in the corridor with Dorothy, and it seemed to me that she'd got in contact with a very weird bunch indeed. There were a lot of other followers waiting there, and they were pretty odd, weren't they?
Well, I was one of them.
Well, I was pretty conventional, and so they seemed odder to me perhaps than they really were. We waited about an hour, and then someone came to the door and asked Dorothy to come in. It was her turn. And Dorothy brought me with her, and we went into this room. My impression is that it was semi-dark, but whether this is right or not, I don't know. It was a medium-sized room, not at all a large place, and the walls seemed to be lined with Indian faces, though whether this is exactly true or not, I don't know. There was a figure in the corner. He was in a white robe, and he was sitting with one leg up in plaster because he'd had some kind of a motor car accident while travelling in the United States. He had long black hair, a rather pale skin, and very, very piercing black eyes and big moustache. And Dorothy was motioned to sit down to one side of him in a chair like this, at a distance about as far as from here to Bob. And I was put at the feet of this figure, and I immediately subsided into my usual role as a journalist of observing a scene in which he had no part. But I had an emotional part in this because I could see that Dorothy was tremendously concerned at this meeting with her master. Barbara looked blandly towards Dorothy, and I expected Dorothy, who usually manages to find a few words to say, I expected Dorothy to come out with some of those words. But to my astonishment, Dorothy was speechless. She was struggling to speak. But she couldn't get a word out. Her feelings were too strong for her, and she'd become silent. And as everyone who ever met Barbara has testified, you always feel Barbara said. You never had any feeling of someone else speaking. Barbara's expression, his extreme vividness of expression, his wonderful hand gestures, and the quiet voice of Eruch, or whoever it might be, speaking from behind him, always keeping himself in the background, gave you absolutely the impression of Barbara speaking, so that you come out saying, I had a wonderful talk with Barbara, and everyone would understand. Well, Barbara turned and said to Dorothy,
Shall I go on from here? Because, of course, I remember it very vividly, and then we can
Indeed,
come back.
indeed.
We can come back to it. Well, you can imagine what it was for me meeting Barbara in the flesh. I had seen him on the mental plane, but to see him there before me in the flesh, I literally I was struck dumb. I almost felt like St. Paul, you know. I just couldn't get a word out, and I sat before Barbara, struggling, and I finally looked at Barbara and managed to say desperately, Barbara, I can't speak. And Barbara said, neither do I. then managed to say, "You don't speak because you don't want to. I can't speak and I want to." And at that moment, Baba did this. And in that moment, without words, Baba had summarized what all my analysis was about. I lived in my head. And I had the feeling, here he has understood, he knows. And at that moment, I felt that we could go on to Tom. So Tom took over, because of that, then he turned to Tom and said, "And why have you come?" Tom?
I didn't take over at all. I was sitting in my familiar detachment, my journalistic removal from the scene, watching this very intense drama of speech and speechlessness. And I had imagined that they would go on talking for a little while, and then we'd both get up and Dorothy would perhaps shake hands or kneel down or whatever she was going to do while I was creeping away quietly. But suddenly to be asked, "Why are you here?" I answered the first thing that came into my mind. "I only wanted to see you." And Baba flung up his arms as though this were the most wonderful reply, showing extraordinary spiritual depth. And I felt, good heavens, I've said the right thing. But then Baba looked at me intently and he said, "And do you like me?"
Can I mimic it? Because I hadn't seen this side of Baba, you see. He'd been my teacher in my dreams. And the way Baba turned to Tom and said, you see, "And do you like me?" It was so childlike. It was so beautiful. And when you think that it wasn't Baba talking, that I believe it was Eruj, to be able to be in such communication with his master, that not only did he get the words, he got the mood and communicated to one exactly what Baba was feeling. This, you see, is what I mean by the land of miracle. And to these words, these childlike, two little boys together, you know. "And do you like me?" Tom, give your answer.
Well, with those words, Baba shot a bolt into my heart. I suddenly found myself struggling to say, "Baba, I love you." But I was quite incapable of it. To come out of my English inhibitedness and out of my journalistic detachment and say to a strange figure, "Baba, I love you," was beyond me. I couldn't rise to the moment. But I did manage to get out, "Yes, Baba, I like you." And Baba said, "And I like you." And he touched me. that was really all that happened. I would like to say that this instantly and profoundly affected my life. No. It took many, many years for whatever happened at this meeting to take effect. Many, many years. Before we... Over to you, but I would like sometime to say a little bit about our second meeting in 1956.
And at the airport incident.
I want to, yes. Will you? You go on now.
Well, Tom had met Barbara, and when we got home, it wasn't until we got home, he said, you know, when Barbara asked me, do you like me? He said, I suddenly wanted to say, Barbara, I love you. I intuited this. I could see that Tom was in the same state, was wanting to say something, but inhibitedness stopped him. And I knew that in that moment, Barbara had called Tom. So, although I felt in my bones I had many years of difficulty ahead of me, because we were able to marry, I personally don't attach an awful lot of importance to church ritual things, because marriage happens when two people fall in love and accept each other. But perhaps we're speaking on a high plane here. For Tom and myself, we had our space-time marriage ceremony about a year later, and it was then that the difficulties started. And precisely because Tom valued the world of space-time and lived in it almost completely, not quite, but almost, and I valued the mystical, the eternal, and I lived up here. So that the marriage of Tom and myself has been the coming together, if I use this, not because I think it of myself. Barbara was bringing the heavenly and the earthly together, the balance. This I should be able to say more of in my talk on human perfectibility, because it is only when we have our feet on the earth, well on the earth, and our eyes looking upwards and forwards and downwards, that we arrive at any possible perfection. But Tom and I had to go through what every married couple goes through in some form or other, whatever form it may take. And when I spoke of a crisis in my life, it was that Tom felt he couldn't take any more of what he felt was the religious and so on. And he wanted, quite frankly, to get away from it. And this is why I knew I was in Barbara's hands. Barbara had put us together. I knew it was right. And I knew that I had to hold on, that it was not merely a question of hanging on to Barbara's Dharma. It was a question of being patient. And when, in a dream, Barbara finally said to me, if Tom says to you this morning, I am going, now you can let him go. But that was the morning that Tom said to me, I'm staying. Now Tom would like to say a bit about 1956.
we met Barbara again. On this occasion that we've described, it was a meeting that perhaps took half an hour in all. But the second time he came, in 1956, he was staying for 3 or 4 days at the Rubens Hotel near Buckingham Palace, and Dorothy was there with him more or less continuously during those days. I was working on a newspaper, and I only got occasionally to attend more or less the public side of Barbara's stay. But on the day he arrived, we each had a little interview with him. In this interview, I remember going to his room and embracing him, and the extraordinary feeling when you put your arms round him, he seemed to be both very light and very solid. And I felt that, having come at all, I felt I was in some way under false pretenses. I felt he would feel I was a true devotee like all these others, and that I couldn't claim to be. So, with a combination of stupidity and perhaps a degree of honesty, I said to him, "Barbara, I'm very happy to come and see you, but I cannot believe that you are God." And Barbara said, "Why worry about that?" He said, "Every night, when you go to bed, before you go to sleep, just for 1 minute, think about me. And try to think about me, not as you see me here now, but as I truly am." If I had paid attention to that and acted on it, I might have cut short our and my difficulties by many years. However, the story of my contacts with Barbara was one of my own failure to listen and to take advantage of the opportunities given me. On the day he was leaving London, he was going from the airport, and it was still a very ramshackle airport in 1956, very difficult to find your way about. The proper terminals hadn't been constructed. I was kept working late at the office, which meant that I hadn't, with sufficient determination, refused to do any more work or to see somebody who wanted to see me, so that I was in a hurry driving down. I drove down through the traffic to the airport, and it was already getting to be late when I got there. I found my way to near the terminal, the entrance from which people went in to leave, and there were no parking places. There were only ones marked Director General, reserved for this person and that person. And instead of sticking my car in one of those and letting them worry about it afterwards, I looked for somewhere where I could put it. And having found somewhere, I ran all the way to the terminal, and Barbara and the Mandalay had just said goodbye to everybody. They had just gone through into the special section reserved for people who are going to board the plane, and I could see them just about to vanish through the doors. And I stepped over the cord and began to run towards Barbara to say goodbye, and officials appeared very naturally and caught hold of me. You can't go and hand big diamonds or pearls or packages of currency to people who are just going to board planes.
Or drugs.
Drugs, so they very naturally
Pulled me back.
So I say all this for the benefit of those who may feel they missed opportunities, because Barbara is very persistent. You can make a lot of mistakes and miss a lot of opportunities. But if he's cast his hook, in the end, there's no escape. And by being here, it's clear he's cast his hook into all of you, just as much as into Dorothy and myself.
I had been sitting in the lounge with Delia and C.B. Purdom, and all the time I kept turning round, praying that Tom would get in time to be able to say goodbye to Barbara. And when they were called, the Mandel and Barbara were called to, those who were going on the plane were called. And I saw them go towards the gate, and I looked round, there was no Tom. I felt a moment of absolute despair. I thought, am I ever going to make it with Tom? But Tom arrived just in time, and in the distance. I was waving, Charles was waving, Delia was waving. Barbara turned round, and there he saw Tom attempting to run towards him, and Barbara did that. So I breathed a sigh of relief, but I still felt a few more years yet. However, years pass, and once Barbara has got you, he's got you, and here we are. That is how we came to Barbara. Once, when Kitty Davy was over, and we were all at the house, the British group were all at the house of R.D. Jr., someone asked me to tell the story of how Tom and I came to Barbara. And I said, it's a very long story. And R.D. Jr. said, not now, not now, not now. It was a social occasion. And I started to say a few words of how, and Kitty said, you didn't meet Barbara. Barbara met you. I said, sorry, Kitty, all right. Yes. How Barbara met me. I only talked for a few minutes, but nearly everything I said, Kitty was correcting me. Barbara did this, you didn't do it. It became very difficult. But I see Kitty's point of view, you see, how I met Barbara, because, of course, it is very important. We put ourselves, how I met the Master. How the Master meets us, of course. Only the Master knows. Would anyone like to ask a question?
Yes. What was the incident, or how did you finally come to see Barbara as he was? What made that change?
I
haven't quite got there.
When was it that you came to feel that Barbara was God?
Oh, I see. How did we come to?
Well,
How long did it take?
How? Dorothy had always.
Yeah, I know. How did you?
How did I? I think it only finally became clear when we started trying to write Much Silence, and I read everything I could find about Barbara and of Barbara's own words. I think up till that time I would have hedged and been cagey, but the 2 years or so in which I spent my spare time reading Barbara intently convinced me absolutely. I might perhaps add that it was probably more the story of his life, because I found, for instance, God Speaks extremely difficult to understand. And the first twice that I read it through absolute determination and willpower to complete it, even whether I understood it or not. And perhaps the third time I began to begin vaguely to apprehend and so on. So it was the working on his life and words that...
And let me say that the writing of much silence, it should have led to a divorce. Tom is a writer. I'm a speaker. And the act of writing, of condensing and being able to give the essence of something in a few well-chosen words, is a creative act of very great discipline. The ability to communicate, to talk. You just talk, you use the words that come to you, and there's no discipline about it. It's just a matter of what can I give, what can I communicate. So I was the one who, I think there's very little of my writing in much silence. The ending of the last chapter is all mine. But Tom did the writing, and you see, I would want something expressed in this way. For example, I remember we didn't speak to each other for 2 days because I insisted that Tom must say something about Maya. And Tom said, it'll hold the book up, it's unimportant. I said, it's not unimportant. It is very important. And if you leave this out, you ruin the book. However, at the end of 2 days, Tom came and said, I'm sorry. I'm ready to put in Maya. And so it wasn't my words, let me say, because it was agreed between us when we started the book that the whole aim, as far as we were concerned, was to keep ourselves out of it. We wanted it to be Barbara's life, Barbara's teaching. And so I had condensed the discourse on Maya into a few words, and Tom was able to put it in. But you see, Tom apologized. I accepted it, was very glad, said quietly under my breath, thank you, Barbara. And we went on.
Did you ever get back your writing of your dreams from the psychoanalyst?
Did I?
Ever get back the dreams, your first set of dreams from the psychoanalyst?
No.
Or even the teaching?
No, that's what I'm complaining about. I never got them back.
You should get copies.
And the analyst died. You see, this is what was... You see, he kept it. Yeah, he kept my lies.
There's somebody over there.
Would you stand up? Both of us are a tiny little bit deaf.
Do you recall the sound of Bob's voice when he gave you the discourses in your dreams? And also, did you feel they needed editing also?
A very important question. In those early days, when Barbara was giving me this, I heard no voice. Barbara didn't speak to me. It was though it was a communication from mind to mind. I would, in a semi-awake state, see Baba. The dreams were always in colour, so that I got the sense of Baba's beautiful light skin, his gestures, his hair, the expression of his, but no voice. And you see, I would wake up and I would know all that had been communicated to me, not in words, but it had been put into my head, so to speak. And I would, knowing I was going to an analytical session, I would try and write down what I had. But I have had, in the last year or two, meetings with Baba on the mental plane in which he has actually spoken to me. And all I can say is that his voice is full of authority, masculine, strong, and full of infinite tenderness. Because Baba is, of course, the divine father, mother. When Baba as Baba puts food into your mouth, Anita has described it beautifully. What role is Baba enacting? He is the mother feeding his children. When he is putting knowledge into your head, he is the father, teaching you, disciplining you.
Can you share the content of any of your last dreams the last couple of years?
Can I?
Share the content of them, or are they personal?
I could, Georgine, but I won't. The relation, it's time, we're coming, 1 minute. I think I can best sum it up. Tom, may I give the... I'm not interested in your sins.
Of course.
I can tell you something that Baba said to Tom in a dream when Tom was coming to the end of his resistance. Baba said to him, I am not interested in your sins. I am only interested in the state of your heart. Tom, is your heart open? If your heart is open, all is well. Therefore, Georgine, one's intimacy with the Master is an intimacy. Tom wanted to tell Baba all his sins. You see, Baba wouldn't listen. He wasn't interested. So, I could tell you many dreams in which I have started. Baba, I feel this, I feel that, always feeling one's imperfection and the various things Baba has said. I could tell you it would be too long. Georgine, just accept it as that. That is as much as I can share with you. And in telling you this, let me finish once more with, brothers and sisters, Baba is not offering it just to a selected one or two. It is yours, every one of you, if you will allow him. I would like here to quote what are for me the most poignant words in the New Testament, spoken by Jesus. How oft would I have gathered ye, as a hen gathereth her chickens beneath her wings, and ye would not. Don't be of the ye would not. Baba comes to give us the greatest treasure, we can possibly have. He has called you, every one of you here, he has called you. Let him perfect you in his way by the path of suffering, happiness, which helps us to arrive at the love he is trying to communicate to us and awaken in us. It is for every one of us. Avatar Mehebaba Kite. Mehebaba Kite. Avatar Mehebaba Kite.